Hey Mustangs, welcome. I'm going to go over just a broad overview of what our data dashboard shows you and what you can understand from it. So here, when you click the link to get to the dashboard, you'll see this page that has a broad overview of basically everything. So it has some demographics towards the top, right up here. It has bar graphs corresponding to each question, asking about how people rated different aspects of the GMHS community. You can see some of the improvements that people suggested and where improvements are most necessary. But that's really all that you can see on the first page. To really get a deeper understanding, I recommend that you go into the top right corner and use the menu over there to explore different areas. So for example, if you go to part 1, demographics, it might take a second to load, but then you can see all of the demographics and of everyone who has responded. Then if you go to part 2, ratings, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, so hang with me for a second. But under the ratings section, we included something called an inclusivity score. For every person who said that they strongly disagree with a question, that was considered a 0. Every disagree was considered a 40, agrees were given a 60, and strongly agree was given a 100. Then every single one of those responses was averaged together and mashed into that one giant inclusivity score that you see right here on your screen. We also did a breakdown on this page of inclusivity score by question. So for example, for this first question, asking people to rate how to what extent they agree with the statement GMHS is an inclusive community. Everyone who said strongly disagree, that was considered a 0. Disagree was considered a 40. Agree was considered a 60. And then strongly agree was considered a 100. And then you can find that score right underneath each question. And as you'll see here, those inclusivity scores show up for each question. You can also see at the very bottom all of the inclusivity scores compared by question so that we can see where we need the most work. So for example, you notice that question 7 is a little bit lower and question 3 is a little bit higher. Well, question 7, insensitive racial, ethnic, sexuality, ableist, and gender-based comments are not tolerated by GMHS students. It sounds like, according to your peers, that's what we need to work on. Meanwhile, we're doing pretty well in the fact that our identities appear to be respected by the GMHS staff. A lot of 3s and 4s and an inclusivity score that matches that. It's important to note that this isn't a percentage. As I said, the 3 represents agree. It means that we're doing well. A higher score is obviously better, but we can't be perfect. We're only as good as everyone combined. And as long as some people feel like they strongly disagree with the statement, our whole inclusivity score is going to go down. But that's to be expected. We're not going to have a perfect 100 inclusivity score because not everyone is going to strongly agree with every statement. One other interesting thing that you're able to do in this dashboard is really break down the exploration to whatever extent you want to see. So for example, you can break it down by grade. So I'm in 12th grade. I'll only look at 12th graders. Again, sorry, it takes a second or two to load sometimes, with he, him pronouns. So I think that's about 30 some odd people who responded to the survey. You can see my demographic, my broader demographic, we have an inclusivity score of 68.5. Others may be different. I encourage you to take the time and really play with it and explore, see how race and ethnicity plays in, see how religion, see what you can find about if students are like quote unquote lifers, if they've been in the Falls Church City School District for their whole lives, if they identify as LGBTQ+, they say that they have any sorts of disabilities, their economic status is different. Check that all out, explore, and really learn, really go into it with an open mind. Recognize that everyone has different experiences and not everybody is the same, but that doesn't mean that we can't accept those experiences, and we have to accept and understand them as the reality. So I'm going to just reset this really quickly before going on to my next section. There we go. Part 3 is improvements. So these are, in the survey, this was represented as a couple of checkbox questions where we asked what subjects could be improved in terms of inclusivity and cultural awareness, and what are some specific areas of the curriculum that could present a greater cultural awareness. So you can see how many people selected each one of those, as well as a bunch of the other written in responses. So such as people who said that this just isn't necessary at all, or people who gave no response, or even some other specific options. Again, understand it, look at it, really, this is who we are as a community, and it's important to understand that. Finally, probably the most impactful is under part 4, stories. We ask people to submit any stories of prejudice, insensitivity, or discrimination that they have seen or experienced in our George Mason High School community. Once you go over to this page, you can scroll through and see what people are actually experiencing, what people are seeing, what people have seen, what people don't think belongs in our community. Don't worry, we did omit any that said any people who requested that their response not be shared. It's not shared, don't worry. We also omitted a few that just said, for example, nothing or weren't productive in any way. I recommend that you spend the bulk of your time on this page, really read through it, because this is our community and it's important to see that and understand that. It's pretty interesting and it's really eye-opening as well, but it really is helpful and it's who we are. I hope this brief introduction has been helpful, and really take the time, explore this whole dashboard, and I look forward to making George Mason High School the best it can be. Thanks.
So today we are going to be talking about the GMHS Equity and Inclusion Survey results. So this was a survey that us, the Social Justice Committee, which is part of the executive board of the SCA, we put out to the George Mason community back in December. And so I know it's been a little while, but we are here to talk about the results of this data and basically what it means for Mason and our community and the way we strive to have a community that is equitable and inclusive. So to go over a bit of a summary, as you can see here on the front page, there are 327 responses. So that is a sizable portion of the student body. And some other key things to note is that there's a largest proportion of students represented from the freshman class. There's about 31.5% of respondents were from the freshman class, and only 17.7% were from the 12th grade class. So just some things to note as you're looking at this data. But we also have some other key parts of this data, such as the inclusivity score, which Jonah has so kindly explained. But the inclusivity score doesn't necessarily represent all of Mason and how it is inclusive. There are other things such as stories that we need to fill in the gaps and to assess the inclusivity and equitability of Mason as a whole. And another thing to note is that this survey came out very close to the name change, which I think we can all agree was contentious and emotional for a lot of people. So some of that sort of emotion might be reflected within the data. So just keep that in mind as you're looking through the data. And I hope you all find this interesting and really find this engaging and come into this with an open mind to see and challenge your own perspectives on Mason community.